I'm attorney Emily Anderson with RSH Legal. The date you were injured has a significant impact on the amount of benefits you can receive for a shoulder work injury in Iowa. If you were hurt before July 1, 2017, and you have a permanent injury, you will receive some portion of 500 weeks of permanent disability benefits. The amount you are entitled to depends on how the injury has impacted your ability to work. If you were injured on or after July 1, 2017, you are still entitled to medical and temporary wage replacement benefits. However, your right to permanent disability benefits is more limited. The difference in benefits for the same injury is due to the monumental changes in Iowa's workers' compensation law. Large special interest groups like big business and the insurance companies pushed for harmful changes to Iowa's workers' compensation system, and the majority party voted these changes into law. These changes put large caps in place on what benefits injured workers can receive, especially when it comes to shoulder injuries. Unfortunately, shoulder injuries are common in the workplace. It's a joint in our bodies that gets used and abused a lot. These injuries have a very significant impact on a worker's ability to go back to the jobs he or she was able to do before the work injury. Big business and the insurance companies know this, so they pushed for legislative changes to cap what injured workers can recover for permanent injuries to the shoulder, even when these injuries are career-ending. The law does not change the type or amount of medical care you can receive for your shoulder injury, nor your entitlement to temporary wage replacement benefits that you can receive while you're off work healing from a shoulder injury. The major changes affect how much permanent disability is owed. In Iowa, there are two main types of injuries: scheduled member injuries and body as a whole injuries. Scheduled member injuries are injuries to the limbs. Each limb is assigned a maximum amount of weeks to be paid in permanent disability. For example, a work injury to the arm is worth a maximum of 250 weeks of permanent disability benefits. How many weeks in benefits you receive depends on your physical impairment rating. This is a percentage assigned by a doctor, which is supposed to reflect the functional loss to the body part. The doctor uses a guide published by the American Medical Association to assign the rating. For example, let's say the doctor assigns an impairment rating of 10% to the injured arm. In that case, the injured worker would receive 25 weeks of permanent disability benefits. There isn't a lot of wiggle room in how many weeks you can receive. In fact, the legislature also enacted a new law that says only expert testimony can be used to determine the functional impairment in scheduled injury cases. Before the law change, the workers' compensation judge could consider evidence from other sources, like testimony from the injured worker himself. This scheduled injury system can produce harsh results. Even if the injury is career-ending, the amount of permanent disability received depends solely on the functional impairment rating to the limb and not other factors that could result in more compensation. That brings us to body as a whole injuries. These are injuries to the core of the worker's body, like the head, spine, and hips. For these injuries, if the worker is not offered work by the employer where he was injured, the number of weeks the injured worker receives in permanent disability benefits depends on the injured worker's loss of earning capacity. Loss of earning capacity is an evaluation, not a calculation. There are over 10 factors that must be weighed to determine how much an injured worker receives in permanent disability benefits. The injured worker will receive a percentage of 500 weeks if the worker is still capable of working in some capacity, or lifetime permanent disability benefits if the worker cannot return to gainful employment. With that background, now we can talk about what a shoulder injury is worth in benefits both before and after the new workers' compensation law took effect. Shoulders used to be considered body as a whole injuries. Iowa's new law has changed shoulders from body as a whole injuries to scheduled member injuries. Under the new law, shoulder injuries are now worth a maximum of 400 weeks of permanent disability benefits. The doctor-assigned impairment rating will now determine how many of the 400 weeks an injured worker receives. It doesn't matter if the injured worker is limited in what he or she can do for work. Now, that plays no part in the determination of what is owed in permanent disability benefits. Here's an example to give some perspective of how drastic this change in the law is. Let's say a nurse hurts her shoulder transferring a patient at work. She has 2 shoulder surgeries and ends up with a permanent 25-pound lifting restriction. She can still work, but she can no longer work as a nurse at a hospital or nursing home. She receives a 15% physical impairment rating, and her weekly workers' compensation rate is $500 per week. Under the old law, the judge finds she has suffered a 40% loss of earning capacity. This would entitle her to 200 weeks at $500 per week for a total of $100,000 in permanent disability benefits. The same injury under the new law would be worth just $30,000. Even with the changes in the law, you still have rights. Here are 4 mistakes to avoid to protect your rights after an injury at work to your shoulder. Number 1, don't take the insurance company's word for it that your work injury is a shoulder injury. If you have pain in your neck or back, your injury may actually be to the body as a whole. If you have surgery and the doctor operates on a part of your body that may not be considered the shoulder, like the clavicle, this may be considered a body as a whole claim. If the injury is actually to your arm, you may have access to a different type of benefit called second injury fund benefits. Before you let the insurance company characterize the nature of your injury, talk to an Iowa workers' compensation attorney. Number 2, don't accept the impairment rating given by the insurance company's doctor. Under Iowa law, an injured worker is entitled to a second opinion on his or her impairment rating. The injured worker gets to choose the doctor who provides the second opinion. Do not let the insurance company choose the doctor for you. Seek out the advice of a knowledgeable workers' compensation attorney. They can give you advice on the timing for a second opinion and what doctors in your area are trustworthy. Number 3, you may be eligible for vocational assistance. There is a new provision in the law that provides vocational assistance paid for by the employer when an injured worker becomes severely disabled by a shoulder injury. Speak to a workers' compensation attorney about these benefits. Number 4, if your injury came on over time, don't let the insurance company tell you it happened after July 1st, 2017. Work injuries that come on over time are called cumulative trauma injuries. Figuring out the actual date of injury can be tricky. With the changed law, the date of injury may have a huge impact on the amount of benefits you are entitled to. If you have a cumulative injury to your shoulder, check with a workers' compensation attorney to see if the insurance company's date of injury is legally correct. If you have a shoulder injury at work, please contact RSH Legal at 1-800-433-0283. For additional information, you can also visit our website and download our free law guide to Iowa workers' compensation claims.